Hello there, friends, and welcome back to Retro Unscripted. My name is Peter, and this is episode number 14. I'm glad you could join me once again today. I want to take you back to the year 1999, which, believe it or not, is now 15 years ago. Back then, I was still working for Funcoland, which was, at the time, a video game buy, sell, and trade chain. That was before the GameStop conglomeration came to be. I started out as an assistant manager in the fall of 1998 before getting my own store in Springfield, Massachusetts in the first part of 1999. There are some things that I take away from my experience working for Funcoland. The first, of course, is how difficult that retail management can be. I lasted for about a year and a half in retail management before I melted down and I needed to find a different job. Of course, the job involves long hours, lots of pressure, managing a staff of employees, some of whom you don't always get to choose for yourself, you kind of inherit. And there are some other things, too, that go with the territory that tend to burn you out before very long, unless you're built for it or unless you're used to it. So that's one takeaway. The other takeaway is that there are certain games from my time working for Funcoland that really stick out to me, even if they're not necessarily accepted as being great or popular games. One example is the game that's behind me that you see playing on the GX TV right now, which is Irritating Stick. Irritating Stick was a game that I saw during my last days as an assistant manager in West Springfield. We had an open copy of it, as we had to open copies for customers who wanted to try a game before they bought it because there were no returns. So a customer tried it, didn't buy it, so I always used to have it running on our GX TV at the store, and I would play it from time to time, and I eventually got fairly good at it. And there are certain things about Irritating Stick that kind of stand out. Its goofy presentation, the announcer that constantly yells at you, the appearance of characters like Mr. or Mrs. Robot, and of course the 3D style presentation that you see. These are all things that stuck out to me, and I eventually wound up buying that copy of the game, the open copy, before I wound up changing stores. I still play the game from time to time, but I know that when the game was reviewed, it wasn't very popular and certainly not well accepted or well received by other reviewers. But still, this is a game to me, even though not a lot of other people like it, I do. Now, part of it is because I think the game is okay, but the other part of it that I can't deny is the fact that it signifies a certain time in my life that I remember pretty fondly. That being the time that I worked for Funcoland, the time in my life that was during my engagement before I got married, the time in my life when I was working my way back from some other difficulties in my personal life. Things were turning around and things were going pretty well. So, Irritating Stick is one of those games. There are some others, too, that stick out. Now, one that's popular, obviously, and doesn't really belong in this category, but something I take away from working at Funcoland was my enjoyment of Metal Gear Solid. When Metal Gear Solid was first introduced, and when the demo first started going around from store to store, from person to person, I was not at all interested in the game. But my manager at the time, his name is Justin, still a great guy. Justin actually got me to play the game in late 1998 and early 1999, and we actually played through the campaign for the first, through it all, while in store because things weren't very busy at the time. We were fairly new in the area. And I liked the game so much that I went out and I bought my own copy. This, of course, obviously isn't my copy. This is a Greatest Hits copy that came out later. But if it wasn't for my time at Funcoland and my time with Justin where he actually got me to try the game, who knows whether I would have played it and actually liked it. So that's one thing I take away. But then there are the games that aren't really very good. Cyber Tiger is one of those. Cyber Tiger, of course, is a weird kid/adult golf game where Tiger plays as a teenager or a kid, and it's kind of arcade style, but kind of not. I know the game isn't very good, but I recently had to get this back in my library because I have very fond memories of it when I was working at Funcoland. We used to have it running on the GX TV. I used to play practice rounds on days off when I would come to visit the store. And it's something that sticks out in my mind as memorable. Now, I wouldn't recommend going out and buying this game. There are certainly other golf games for the PlayStation that are much more memorable, and certainly a lot better. But still, to me, this is a game that I'll play from time to time because it takes me back. It's a signpost in my life that reminds me of when I was working at that Funko Land store, and when I would be playing, waiting for customers to come in, and a customer would ask me why on earth I would be playing this game instead of a different golf game. And these are the memories that I carry with me. Then there are a couple of Nintendo 64 games that I remember. One of which, and this is from '98, but I played it a lot into 1999 too. South Park for the Commodore 64. Let me try that again. For the Nintendo 64, I was thinking Commodore 64 from an earlier Twitter discussion. South Park, again, is not a very good game at its core. Repetitive enemies, that turkey sound that'll never leave your brain, very simplistic gameplay, very linear, not a lot to explore. These are all knocks on the game, but I played so much of it in 1998 and 1999 because I was working at Funko Land and because it was something that customers were interested in. The show was just getting really, really popular at the time. That sticks in my mind. So when I got another Nintendo 64 in late 2012 and early 2013, this was one of the first games that I wanted to try and find because I had such fond memories of it. Another game that I have fond memories of that not a lot of people tend to like very much is Star Soldier Vanishing Earth, which is this guy right here. It's one of the few shoot-'em-ups for the Nintendo 64 that are around, and certainly not at all inspired. The graphics are kind of drab. The music is nothing necessarily to write home about, and the gameplay is very basic shoot-'em-up gameplay, but at the same time, it's something that I played a lot of in 1998 and 1999 during my time at Funko Land. So it's a game that when I play it, as I'm shooting down other ships, or while I'm playing South Park, if I'm throwing snowballs at turkeys, or if I'm playing Cyber Tiger and I'm listening to those really weird sounds and launching rocket golf balls and such, I kind of, in my mind, in the back of my mind, I'm remembering certain things that happened during my time at Funko Land, the people that I met, the people that I worked with, the things that I learned, the things that I took away. One game that I don't have in my library that I have memories of, and unfortunately not very fond memories of, is of Superman for the Nintendo 64. Superman is turning 15 years old this year in 2014. Now, Superman, as you've probably heard if you've watched any number of video game reviews of it on YouTube or otherwise, is considered one of the worst games of all time. And I can tell you firsthand as a video game store manager that customers certainly did not appreciate it very much. As a matter of fact, I had customers trying to return the game same day after they picked it up. This game's terrible. I hate this game. How could you sell me something like this? It was pretty embarrassing because I consider myself, and considered myself back then, to be a fairly decent authority on video games and be able to make recommendations for people. And this was one that really caught me by surprise because I hadn't really read anything negative about the game until it came out. Then it took everyone by surprise. People didn't like it, and lo and behold, not only were people trying to return it or trying to trade it in, but I took a hit to my credibility a little bit, being the guy that always recommends, or generally recommended, fairly good games, and that one just kind of bit me in the butt. As an interesting side note to Superman 64, my then wife was working for Blockbuster, which was the next town over, and when we both got home from work during Superman launch day, she actually read me the riot act, because she had customers bringing the game back after renting it same day, demanding their rental fees back because the game was so horrible. And I remember very specifically, she asked me point blank, how could you, of all people, not know that Superman 64 was going to be this bad? And honestly, I didn't have an answer. And I kind of got caught with my pants down on it. So it was pretty embarrassing, but still I look back on Superman, and it's a game although I shouldn't put in my library, I'm probably going to put in my library at some point because of the time in my life that it represents. Not necessarily because it's a fantastic game or a game that I'll probably play a lot of, but because I can go back in my library and pick up that game and think back to all of the flack that I received from customers, from my wife, about how bad a game it was, and I'll have that memory to kind of carry with me. So those are just some examples of games that I consider to be signposts in my life, even though they're not necessarily the most popular or best games. Obviously, Metal Gear is an exception, but the other games that I showed you in this video, including Irritating Stick behind me, certainly not viewed by many as great games or even good games, but still games that I will play from time to time that'll take me back 15, 16 years ago to a different time in my life when things were pretty good. Not that they're bad now by any means, but a different time in my life when I was a different person, before I had started writing, before I had started doing sales analysis, or obviously even shooting videos like this. So it's kind of neat to revisit that time, the things that were popular back at that time, and what I was doing with myself at that time. So that is today's episode. I know it kind of looks back a little bit, and it's more of a personal retrospective than it is looking at the quality of these games, but it's still pretty important to me when I look back, not only on games but on systems, because I can use those to mark certain events and certain life occurrences that only video games can really do, ranging from the Nintendo 64 and my paternal grandmother's death to the purchase of the PlayStation 2 that I talked about in an earlier episode when the Dreamcast went away. I can kind of piece and put all those pieces of the puzzle together to be able to tell my life through gaming, which is kind of a neat thing. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, feel free to give me a follow on Twitter if you happen to be there, at RetroUnscripted. You can also drop an email to retrounscripted@gmail.com if you have suggestions or ideas for the show that you'd like me to cover. And until the next time, which will be in just a couple of days, my name is Peter, and I thank you very much for watching Retro Unscripted. I will see you on that next episode. Take care, everybody.